Yeah, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I think there are ACA members, MASA members, and IAB members joining us today. So thank you for that. I think what we try and do with these webinars is obviously Byron says, "Hey, Dr. Fou, good to see you again." With these webinars, we try and create spaces where our industry can engage with important topics for marketers and agencies around effectiveness, efficiency, and ultimately for today to talk about how to make every rand work harder in a market where everyone's being asked to do more with less. Finding ways to reduce waste is an important part of improving marketing performance. So obviously digital media has been an enormous opportunity, but it's a complex and fast moving ecosystem, and it raises important questions around transparency, measurement, accountability. Can you all hear that thunder in the background? Is it off-putting? I don't know.
No.
Okay, good.
It's fine.
So I think the point of the session like today is to help our industry stay informed, especially with AI. Everything's moving so fast. What's changing? How is it changing this topic at hand? And so that we can be informed and ask better questions. So a big thank you to the TruthSets South African team, Mark Delwang and Jonathan Picton, for partnering with us to bring Dr. Fou to our audience today. I've been following Dr. Fou, as many of you have probably, for many years on LinkedIn. And a few years ago, had the opportunity to speak with him and to work with the TruthSets team with some South African clients. And it was really eye-opening to me, and I am hoping that it's going to be really interesting and valuable for you as well. So thank you for bringing us Dr. Fou. Thank you, Dr. Fou, for joining us. Mark is actually based in LA, so it's a very early morning for him. Dr. Fou is based in New York, so also equally, well, not so early morning. So thank you for that. And I mean, Dr. Fou spent many years analyzing digital media quality and helping marketers understand what's really happening inside of their campaigns. And I think that what he's going to do today is to have a look at what's happening, what the impact of AI is, and to give us clarity, practical steps, and some questions that expose the gaps in our current tools and assumptions. So with that, I would hand over to you, Dr. Fou. Welcome. And then just to everybody on the call, please use the chat to pop questions in. And Dr. Fou will either address them as he's going through or towards the end. So over to you, Dr. Fou.
Thank you very much, Jillian. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jonathan, for having me today. It's great to be able to share again with all of you. What I'm going to do today is take a step back, talk a little bit about the history of ad fraud, and also address the burning question of how AI is actually affecting everything today. And then we'll talk a little bit about what advertisers are doing to improve their campaigns today. So let me get through the first couple of slides. We will be sharing the deck with you. So there's various links in there in case you wanted to follow up. So for example, my LinkedIn profile is here. I think most of you have seen what I've been writing over the years. And then there's also an article about what Fou Analytics is. But let me spend just 1 minute on the platform, because a lot of the slides that you'll be seeing today are based on data from the Fou Analytics platform. And all of those data points and analytics are coming from live campaigns. I typically don't name clients, but I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of South African clients as well through Jillian and Mark and TruthSets. So we will be sharing some of those examples so folks can learn about what marketers are doing. So the Fou Analytics platform, you'll see in the slides later that there's two parts to it. One is site analytics, and the second is media analytics. So this was something I started about 15 years ago when I left Omnicom. When I was at Omnicom in 2010 through 2012, I was Chief Digital Officer of a group of 8 agencies serving pharma, healthcare, and med device clients. At the time, they were doing a lot of search campaigns, paid search on Google. And when I started looking at the reports, we started noticing things that were very strange, like greater than 100% click-through rates. And the other thing was some of those clicks would keep coming even after the campaign was over, which means there's no ads to click on, but yet we saw clicks arriving on the site. So I started building a set of tools to help me audit those campaigns. And the very first manifestation of that were on-site codes, which we could put onto the pharma companies' websites and see the clicks arriving on the site from various paid media campaigns. And from there, we actually started detecting what we all know now as bots. And bots are basically software programs designed to load your ads, click on them, and then come to your landing page so that your Google Analytics will register them as a visitor. And so a lot of times the advertisers, if they just look at Google Analytics, they can't tell the difference between a bot and a human. And so they're essentially counting the quantity. Oh, great, we got a lot of clicks. We got a lot of visitors coming to the site, and they think the campaign's working. But if half of those visitors were bots, obviously it's not going to lead to any kind of business results. So that's kind of how this all got started. And then after we started measuring the websites with code, we started also to measure the ad impressions, because right around that time, 15 years ago, was when programmatic media buying became mainstream. And that means instead of advertisers going to publishers, sitting across the table and negotiating media buys with them, they're now placing their dollars in programmatic ad exchanges. So just like Wall Street is a stock exchange, right, where they bring together buyers and sellers of shares of stock, the programmatic ad exchanges bring together buyers and sellers of individual ad impressions. And every single ad impression is now put out to bid to try to get the highest bidder. That's where this Pandora's box of fraud got opened, because now for the first time, the advertisers are not buying direct from publishers that they can literally sit across the table from. They are buying from the exchange, and at the time they allocate their budget, they actually don't know where the ads are going. So those programmatic exchanges became a great way for bad guys to onboard tens of thousands of fake websites because they could just make them using WordPress templates. And once they're in the exchange, they start siphoning dollars away. And then very, very few of the advertisers are reviewing the log files or even the placement reports because they have hundreds of thousands of rows in them, right? Because now your ads are going to hundreds of thousands of sites and mobile apps. So that's where the problem of ad fraud really started to balloon. So on the right-hand side, what we call media analytics is where we have an in-ad tag or pixel that's designed to ride along with the ad to see where the ad went and whether some form of fraud like bots are causing the ad to load. So what follows will be, a lot of charts and data to basically show you the problem. Okay, so let me go back to kind of the beginning, the definitions. I can't see the chat window, but Jillian, if you can help me keep an eye on that and just flag a few things if it's pertinent,
Sure.
I'll try to address it while I'm going along.
I'll do that.
Okay, and I'll try to pause between sections to see if there's anything for that section. Okay. So to try to simplify our way of thinking about ad fraud, I've kind of grouped it into 4 categories. And these correspond to the 4 main revenue models according to the IAB. So you've all heard of CPM, right? Cost per thousand. And so there are forms of fraud that simply generate as many impressions as possible. And they already get paid because for every 1,000 impressions, there's a certain CPM, there's a certain price, and they get paid for the tonnage. The second is CPC, cost per click. So that form of fraud involves clicking on the ad. So the best example of that would be search ads, because you actually have to click it before the payment is made, right? So it's based on that revenue model. And then of course there's cost per lead. So some of the marketers and advertisers are paying for completed lead forms and they pay on a cost per lead basis. So there's fraud in that as well, where the bots are filling out the forms and submitting them so they can get paid the CPL. And then finally there's CPA, cost per action, cost per outcome. And that typically is represented by affiliate fraud. And we've known about this from a long time ago. For example, eBay in 2013 had 2 of their super affiliates be arrested by the FBI for outright fraud. Okay. But what we're going to focus on today are the first 2 categories, because even by 2019, a few years into programmatic advertising, the vast majority of dollars went into impressions and clicks because these are the types of ads that were most commonly bought and sold. So when most of the budget are in those first two buckets, that's where the fraudsters focus their efforts because there's much more money there to be stolen. Okay, of course there's fraud in leads and sales, but we'll leave that for another day. So when we look at just ad impressions, you might be wondering, how bad is it, right? So these are just some charts from Fou Analytics, and you can probably surmise that red means bad, meaning bots and various other forms of fraud, and blue means good or humans. And you can see it varies a lot, right? Some of this could be up to 90%. And then in this case, look at this very large campaign. It's like 11.5 billion impressions a month. So very, very large campaigns, and 30% of it is dark red. I won't get into too much of the colors, but just suffice it to say, dark red means we have multiple ways of confirming that there's something wrong with that ad impression. And the reason I'm saying that is some slides that are coming up will show you that fraud is more than just bots now, right? In the early days, like 15 years ago, when the majority of the ad impressions served on websites, the primary form of fraud was bot traffic, meaning fake visitors going to the site. But these days, when mobile apps like flashlight apps, alarm clock apps are loading tens of thousands of ad impressions in the background, you technically don't need bots because it's the app itself doing the fraud. Okay, so just be aware of that distinction when I talk about fraud. It's not just about bots anymore. Okay, so if the problem is that big, probably the next question that comes into your mind is, why hasn't this been more urgently addressed? The problem is, over the last 10 years, some of the trade associations, and I'm just going to talk about the North American ones, have been putting out press releases saying that fraud is 1% or lower. So if you kind of just look across the years, right, from 2017 to 2018 and so on and so forth, down at the bottom, 1.48%, 1.68%. And then the last full year that they published, 0.79%. Okay, so everything's 1% or lower. So you can understand why, if the advertisers thought that fraud was 1%, they were not worried about anything and they kept upping their spend in digital. This is because their trade associations told them there's nothing to worry about. And some of this is based on what I consider to be not valid certifications, where you fill out the paperwork, you pay the fee, and you get certified. And there's no process in place for annual checking to see if the people who were certified actually started committing fraud or had been committing fraud all along. So that's why some of these certifications don't work. But the main issue here is that they're citing the numbers from legacy fraud verification vendors. I won't name names, but you know the two public companies. The problem with their measurement is twofold, and this slide shows you on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. I'll kind of walk you through that. The first part on the left-hand side is where the bots are stripping out the tags. These are the measurement tags of the fraud verification companies, or they're simply blocking them. And so if the tags are blocked, they can't collect any data with which to mark that bot as IVT. So that should be reported as no data. It should not be reported as no fraud. Okay, that's a problem. And on the right-hand side, the other thing is, even when they do have measurement, they typically measure a small portion of the ads. So these numbers might be a little bit too small for you to see on your screen, but let me just talk through the very first row. Monitored ads is a count of the total number of impressions. So in this case, it's 781 million. Measured impressions means the ads that are actually measured with a JavaScript tag, and this is 83 million. So roughly 83 million out of almost 800 million is about 10% measurement rate. So if they only measure 10% of the ads, that means the other 9 and 10 were not measured. But yet, if you look at the fraud incident rate, they report it as 0%. And then they said, oh, 779, which is almost 780 million impressions were fraud-free. So it's basically 100% fraud-free. And the question is, how can they mark something that they didn't measure as fraud-free? It just doesn't make any sense. And then furthermore, if you notice, the delivery site is marked as NA. So they didn't even detect where the ad went, and they still marked it as fraud-free. right? You would suspect that, if they couldn't measure it, they should actually tell you. These are the problems. The bots are blocking out the tags, and when there's no data, they still mark it as fraud-free, and that's not correct. So if you look at the legacy fraud vendor numbers, they're always in the 1% range. But let me layer on one other concept. There's other forms of fraud that waste your budget, but that are not bots or IVT, invalid traffic, even though they should have been marked as such. But just a few simple examples. Ad stacking, where the bad guys are sticking 50 ads in the same ad slot instead of one, like they should. They're getting all counted, right? That's just more volume because the bad guys rely on more volume to make more money. And then pixel stuffing, where the ad is put in a 1-by-1 pixel. Humans can't see that, right? So it's not valuable to you, but yet it's counted as an impression. And then the fake apps, we'll have a lot more examples coming up. But basically, I mentioned before, when the flashlight app is continuously loading ad impressions, when the app is not in use, and when the device is on the nightstand all night long, that's fraud because no one's seeing your ads. But yet that's quantity and that's tonnage that still gets bought and sold. So if you start to take into account these other forms of fraud that are not just bot traffic, you could see how the fraud is many times larger than what these vendors have been reporting. And it's not just me saying it, right? Over the years, I've been this lone voice, crying out in the wilderness, but other people are starting to document that these services that you've been buying from the fraud verification vendors just haven't been working, right? So I have links to all of these. You can just check it out yourself. But I'll kind of close this section by saying there are certain things you can do, meaning ask harder questions, or when they tell you, fraud is 1%, ask them to show you why, right? Ask them to show you the data. More importantly, ask them what percentage of the ads were actually measured, not just assumed to be fraud-free. Okay, so again, this is a slide. These are questions. Just be more aggressive with your vendor and ask them questions. And if they can't explain why and show you data, then it's probably not worth paying for. Okay, so I'm going to just pause here, see if there's any burning questions I need to address right here before I go into the next section.
There's nothing in the chat so far.
All right, sounds good. If any of you have more questions, just put it in the chat and we'll try to get to it. So this next section is to show you some examples of what I call not bot, but it's still fraud, right? We kind of touched upon that before, but let me show you a couple of examples. There are many ways that fraud gets implemented, meaning ad fraud, and I'm sure all of us have heard of MFA sites, made for advertising sites. This is yet another convenient industry acronym that basically hides the severity of the truth, right? MFA means made for advertising, but a lot of sites are made for advertising, right? So to me, this kind of hides the extent of the problem. But what this is saying is that, even at the end of 2024, the ANA, which is the Association of National Advertisers here in the US, started talking about sites that were just created out of thin air for the sole purpose of running as many ad impressions as possible and making as much money as possible before they get taken down. So a lot of these sites, and we still see that, coming up, you're going to see some screenshots of AI generated sites, recipe sites, and whatever. So that's still a very high or prevalent problem. When advertisers started adding MFA sites to their block list, all of those MFA sites started lying about the domain in the bid request so that they can get around those block lists. So essentially, they're doing what bad guys have done all along. And let me explain in very simple terms. If you're a fraudster and you own the site fakesite123.com, you're never going to put your own domain in the bid request because you're not going to get any bids. So every fraudster has an incentive to lie and say, oh, it's CNN.com, oh, it's MarthaStewart.com or some famous site so that they will get bids. And then they leave their own seller ID in the bid request because ultimately they want to get paid. So bottom line is they take a catch me if you can approach to say, okay, well, you can see the discrepancy. If you bothered to check that using ads.txt, you would know that this domain doesn't belong with this seller ID, right? But in practice, what I've seen is that most of the DSPs don't actually enforce ads.txt for you. Okay, we can debate that till the cows come home later, but bottom line is they don't enforce it unless you insist that they do it. They have the feature, they just don't enforce it voluntarily because that means half of their volume is gone. So they're not going to do it for you if you're not asking them to do it. The second part here, if you kind of look through some of the names, it'll give you a chuckle, like Ghastly Oyster, Tasty Uranium, Bitter Lobster, whatever. The bad guys don't care. They're just making app names. These are mobile apps, as as many as they want, so that they can absorb as much of your budget as possible. Okay, so these are fake apps running tons and tons of ad impressions. And then we have fake CTV. So there's been a dozen cases that others have documented of fake CTV. And it goes all the way back many years where Grindr, the mobile app, was basically fabricating fake CTV bid requests because they could make more money from it, right? Rather than selling display ads or video ads. And then we have smart refrigerators fabricating fake CTV bid requests and getting away with it. And then more recently, we see JavaScript code in ad slots fabricating fake CTV bid requests. So there's a ton of fake CTV out there, just be warned. But some of the easy things that we can spot is that when your CTV impressions are running on websites and mobile apps, that's not CTV. So if you're paying CTV prices, you should expect that your ads run on a big TV, not on crappy websites and mobile apps. Okay, so we can get into more of that later. But that's a form of fraud that you're paying for and you're not getting what you thought you were paying for. Okay, so beyond the impressions themselves, the tonnage, the volume, the bots and the fraudsters can do other things like fake the clicks. Now, why would they want to fake the clicks? They do that so that it makes your campaigns look like they're performing, because one of the easiest things to measure is clicks. So they often count the number of clicks or the click-through rate, and the higher that is, the more money the algorithms tend to allocate. So what you're seeing here is an example from PMax, where they're allocating a lot of the budget to fake sites and fake mobile apps. Those have a much higher click-through rate. And on top of that, once they click through to your website, they're also faking the click, because the fraudsters know that the PMax algorithm takes into account activity or interactions on the landing page. And when they see the presence of a click, that's enough for them to assume that there was engagement or interaction on the landing page. So in this case, not only was 84% of the clicks coming from PMax bots, but you'll see that more than 90% of them also faked a click on the landing page. But just looking at the click patterns, you know these are not humans clicking on anything, right? Because you can't get a whole bunch of humans to click the exact same location on the screen, right? Only bots can do that. And similarly here, they fake the consent. So here's a cluster of clicks all in the same location. And then the thing that was clicked is the OneTrust accept button handler. So basically, all these bots are giving consent because they want the ads to load. Not all humans give consent, right? So sometimes for humans, the ads don't even load. But the bot's job is to get as many ads to load as possible. So all of these bots are giving consent so they can get more ads, okay? But one other thing that we can use to corroborate, so all of these are just screenshots from the Fou Analytics platform. When you see that there's no touch events, but you see the clicks, that's not something that a human can do, right? So on a mobile device, a human actually has to touch the screen in order to click something. So when we see clicks, but no corresponding touch events, we know that's not real. Okay, so this is an example of what I call common sense bot detection. So when we can provide you with this level of detail in the analytics, you can understand why it's a bot. Not because we told you it's a bot, but okay, we understand that humans can't click something without touching the screen. Okay. And then fake form fills. I won't go into this too much, but for cost per lead fraud, where advertisers are optimized to only pay when they get the lead, bots are happily filling out the forms. But what we can tell, again, using very simple common sense, is that if there's a form that has 40 fields on it, a human can't complete that in 1 second and submit it. But a bot can, because they can just fill in all the fields at the same time and submit it, right? So These are really simple things that we have the data to show you why it was not a human. Okay, and then here's a couple more things. You see this one on the left-hand side? These are perfectly straight lines. So how many of you can actually move your mouse in perfectly straight lines? Okay, maybe I can. Okay, but you'll see also these clicks are all in the same line. They're all, on the exact same pixel location on screen. So again, we can't get a whole bunch of humans to do that, but it's trivial for bots. Okay, so again, you can just looking at the chart, you can tell. Even without our color coding, you can tell these are fraudulent. And then in the middle, here's some examples. It's a little small to see, but these are 320 by 50 small mobile ads. And you can see all of the clicks are actually in the 320 by 50. So when there's actually a human, not only are we labeling it, color coding it blue, you can see the click locations all make sense. And then, these are actual clicks that you want to count. And then furthermore, these are touch events. So for each click, there's a corresponding touch event. All of that makes sense, right? Common sense human detection as well. Okay. And then a fake form fills we talked about before. Okay. So let me cover off on two more things, affiliate fraud and attribution fraud, and I'll pause for a second for questions. So in terms of affiliate, probably some of the advertisers in the room today are doing affiliate marketing. So basically what they're doing is a tried and true technique, which is loading the affiliate landing page in a browser so that it can set the affiliate cookie. Except in this case, what they're doing is they're buying ad units, so 300 by 250 ad units, and loading the entire affiliate page into the ad unit on Pornhub. Why Pornhub? Because a lot of humans watch porn. And so while they're watching, all of these ads are loading. And in this case, they're loading the affiliate landing page in the ad slot. And when that page loads, the cookies get set. So if they do that for millions and millions of people's browsers, the affiliate cookies are set on all those people's browsers. Whenever any of them buy anything, they get to claim credit. Oh, we drove that sale, when all of it was done under false pretenses. Okay, so again, we can see this. We can help you detect the affiliate fraud and basically cut off those affiliate partners that are actually doing this or letting this happen. Okay. Now, the next one is actually very interesting because a lot of the advertisers ask me, well, our campaigns look like they're performing so well. Our ROAS is so awesome. Our ROI is so awesome. How could it be that there's so much fraud? Well, along with the fake impressions and fake clicks, what the fraudsters are doing is they're gaming attribution, which means that they're tricking the attribution platforms into giving them credit for sales and conversions that they did not drive. So let me show you how this happens. On the left-hand side is something called view-through conversions. So as long as the landing page loads, or as long as the ad impression loads, they basically mark that device as exposed, meaning exposed to the ad. If that person or that device subsequently completes a purchase, they get to claim credit for it. Because the way view-through conversions work is that even if you don't get a click, because that device was exposed or marked as exposed to the ad, if there's a purchase that happens in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, that conversion gets attributed to that single ad impression. But all of us marketers know that a single ad impression, like a display ad, doesn't cause a conversion, right? There's many things that have to happen before that person buys something. So here, it's just a matter of loading the ad impressions and marking that device as exposed, or one step further, loading the landing page to let all of the conversion pixels fire so that device is marked as exposed. And so later they can claim credit for the sale, even though they didn't cause it. Okay, so that's attribution fraud, which makes the ROAS reporting look really, really good. And just to finish off with this example, and then I'll pause. They can even fake it for footfall. So years ago here in the US, there were some location-based ad tech vendors that said, oh, you don't have to pay for the impression. You don't even have to pay for the click. You only pay when we get someone to walk into a Dunkin' Donuts or a Taco Bell, right? Footfall in the physical world. So how do you think they fake that? Easy. Basically, imagine a person, they walk into a Dunkin' Donuts every morning to get their coffee and donuts. Okay, that person is going to go into the Dunkin' Donuts anyway. But again, using this method of view-through conversion, or marking that the device is exposed, the vendors were running low-cost ads so that all 350 million mobile devices in the US were marked as exposed. Literally every mobile device. So whenever any mobile device walks into a Taco Bell, they can claim credit for the footfall, even if that person was going to walk into a Taco Bell or Dunkin' Donuts anyway. So again, the footfall did happen. It's just a way of them kind of claiming credit for the footfall through the attribution reporting. So that's why all the ROAS and ROI reports look so great, even though the ads are shown to bots and not working. So I'll pause there before I go into the next section and see if there's any burning questions.
There are a few questions, and I was just laughing, thinking you have to admire their ingenuity, but I mean, it's crazy. Neil Percy, Neil, you're asking, have you seen any successful PMAX campaigns? Asking for a friend.
Yes, actually, I have an article where we show 3 examples of successful PMAX campaigns and the one example that I showed above where most of the clicks were bots. So in those cases, one actually was Beiersdorf, a big CPG company. There's a way now to upload block lists of sites and apps into PMAX. So when you see those fraudulent sites and apps, you can basically tell PMAX to not serve on them anymore. So there's ways of managing it. So yes, on PMAX we have seen. So look up that article or email me. I'll send you that article later.
Okay, then the next question is Shadia saying, soon enough they're going to develop bots that act like humans. I'm sure the fraud characteristics change all the time to fool the system, or are these long-standing approaches? And I'm sure you're going to talk about that in the next section.
Yeah, these are long-standing approaches. What we've seen is as far back as maybe 2012, 2013. I was working with Human Security, formerly called White Ops, and the bad guys were basically faking the mouse movements. And there was a story back then. They were literally drawing the satanic symbol with the mouse movements on the site because they knew we could see it and they knew we couldn't do anything about it. So, you know, this is more than 10 years. They've been faking the mouse movements. But let me put it this way. That's more expensive, meaning it takes more compute and bandwidth to do all that. So if they can already get away with running the ad impression, right, generating the ad impression, they're not going to waste their time faking the mouse movement if they don't have to. But remember the PMAX example, they know PMAX is looking for engagement on the landing page. So that's why they also do that. But bots are very efficient. They're going to try to move on to the next fake impression as soon as possible. So if they don't have to fake the mouse movement, they're not going to spend the time to do that.
Okay, so Byron's got a very long existential question, which I think I'm going to leave until the end. But his message essentially is, we're in it quite deep. What do agencies do when the decision to place these ads on various digital channels is made by, let's say, clients? And that he's been presenting your slides to senior advertisers and agencies without the message landing. And it's going to get worse with AI. So I'm going to hold all of that to the end. We're going to come back to that because he says you must be highly frustrated by now. So I'm going to get you to answer that at the end.
Yeah, Byron, I've been doing this for 15 years. So it's like I've pulled my hair out already multiple times, but we're still at it. And I basically need all your help to get the message out. But you're right. This has persisted for a long time. But sadly, a lot of the advertisers don't know the extent of the problem because their trade association has told them, don't worry about it. It's low, it's manageable, don't worry about it. But I think now, again, the reason I'm still doing this webinar with you all is to show that the problem has not been solved. And furthermore, we probably can't solve it for the entire industry because there's too many people who don't want to hear it, as you've experienced as well. But my takeaway message is still an optimistic one. Because for the advertisers that do care and that do want to do something about it, there's simple ways that we can help them optimize. But first, they have to see that there is a problem before we can go solve it, right? So that's a great segue into some of the next section because we'll get into what advertisers can do. So let me address the AI question. And there's kind of 3 ways that AI is being talked about in the context of digital advertising. The first is the AI slop sites. And these are literally screenshots from the last couple of months. You don't really have to read too closely, but you can just see that all 9 of these are the exact same template. Okay, so like I said, from 15 years ago, bad guys were already using WordPress templates to generate fake sites by the thousands. Here, no different. Okay, and then if you zoom in on one of these sites, okay, this domain is 33 days old, but yet it's generating millions of ad impressions. How is that possible? Because it's not humans and it's 100% bot traffic. And on top of that, why not stick 50 ads in the same ad slot instead of one, right? These are all just ways of multiplying their ad revenue for themselves, right? Because the bad guys will try to make as much money as possible before they get caught. And then once they get caught, they'll just spin up 10 more websites. Okay, so it's a never ending battle. And then all of these on the top are templates. These on the bottom are templates. There's just countless ones going on. So that being said, this is the reality of it. Everyone thought that ads.txt works and is supposed to block all of this stuff. Okay, well, if it actually works, this stuff shouldn't be showing up in the data. Okay, so obviously it doesn't work, and somebody in the supply chain is not doing their damn job. Okay, that's why all of this stuff still gets in. Okay, so that's AI. It's basically allowing even teenagers, script kiddies, to get in on the ad fraud because it's easy money. Okay. The second is agentic buying. If you look at the spaghetti on the left-hand side, you literally don't have to read it. It just says it's all just complicated and it's not going to work. And then on the right-hand side is a simplified diagram. My key takeaway is to not let these ad tech bros sell you this agentic buying, because what do you think is going to happen when you turn loose some of these agents to buy on your behalf, meaning to spend your money on your behalf? It's all the same crap. It's all the same bad data. The agents can't tell what's good data, what's bad data, what's honestly declared, what's deliberately falsified. So when they go out and spend your money, they're literally just spending your money. And all it does is accelerate the waste of your budgets. Okay. I have not seen anything good come of it. So again, all of this is theory. So they might have some great ideas, but in every single case over the last 15 years, what the industry thought was a good idea turned out to be completely useless or the exact opposite in practice. And let me just cite one thing. I hope there's not a Group M person on here, but Group M declared universally through a press release years ago, we will only buy 100% viewable ads for our clients. Okay, on the surface, you might think, oh, that makes sense. But what it ended up doing is it sent more money to the bad guys, because all the bad guys have falsified viewability to make sure that it's 100% viewable 100% of the time. Whereas a real publisher like ESPN, when you have 4 ads on the page and 3 of them start off above the fold and one of the ad units is below the fold, it's basically 3/4, 75%. So instantly they made a quarter of the impressions on a legitimate publisher not sellable. So it harmed real publishers and it sent more money to the bad guys. So that's an example that I've seen over the years where this sweeping declaration, we're going to buy 100% viewable ads for our clients. They thought they were doing a good thing, but in practice, it actually did the opposite. It sent more money to the bad guys and it harmed the good publishers. Okay, I've seen that over the years. If you have any questions about AdCP and all this agentic buying, ask me. Okay, ask me hard questions. We'll
Dr.
try to
Fou,
figure it out together.
a really
Yeah.
interesting question that Megan's just raised. She says, sorry for my ignorance. This is not a world that's familiar to me. Who are the bad guys? I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, so on the one end, there's bad guys that are creating these fake websites, fake mobile apps, and whatever. They're the ultimate recipients of those fraudulent dollars. However, all the middlemen are complicit. So think of an SSP, right? Supply platform, right? Supply side platform. They let all of these sites into their platform so that they can start selling impressions. All the SSPs, all the DSPs, all the exchanges make more money when there's more volume. So they're all dependent on the fraud. Without the fraud, there's not as many trillions of impressions to buy. So you ask who's the bad guy? Okay, I'm going to blame some of the middlemen as well, because it was their job to stop this from getting into the supply, of the, the industry. But because they want more volume, they look the other way and let these bad guys onboard all of these AI slop sites, 33 days old, that should have been caught, right? But yet it's in the inventory that's being bought and sold by the millions, okay? So that's kind of a long way to answer. It's not just some hackers somewhere, right? They're definitely part of it, but now anyone can set up 10,000 websites with AI easily and start getting in on stealing ad budgets from you all, the advertisers, okay? And then the last question I get asked a lot is, can AI help detect the fraud? And the short answer is no. Okay, basically all the legacy fraud verification companies that have said, oh yeah, we launched these new AI products and all that kind of stuff. In fact, they even said we have AI slop detection. Okay, so if those worked, these shouldn't be in the supply that I'm seeing. Okay, it didn't work. Now let me explain it in a little bit more detail. Okay, in Fou Analytics, we have different color coding for the different kind of bots and users. So search crawlers like Bing bot, Google bot, and things like that are marked yellow. Declared bots are marked orange, and these are the ones that say their name honestly. So there's various crawlers and other cybersecurity checkers and whatever, they declare themselves, so you know they're a bot. And then there are the red ones, which are what we call bad bots, and these are the ones that deliberately don't declare themselves, and they do everything they can to hide themselves. All right, so this now includes AI crawlers, because sometimes, like the Perplexity example, people said, we don't want your crawlers on our site to steal our content. So they deliberately misdeclare. And there was a case that Cloudflare published. The Perplexity bots were basically pretending to be Googlebot, and they were ignoring the robots.txt. So they're all getting through. So that's why these are color coded as red. And then finally, humans are blue. Now, if you just look across some of these quantities, right, for the declared bots and the search crawlers, these are hundreds of thousands, because the same bot can just load thousands and thousands of pages at the same time. Look at the humans, single digits, because humans don't look at 1,000 different websites at the same time, right? They look at a small number of page views per site that they visit, okay? And then, so there's differences in bots that have to be differentiated. And on the right-hand side, here's an example of what is a bot, but is not fraud. Okay, again, the AI agents can't tell that apart because they don't have the context. And let me just kind of explain this simply. So in this case, you see a big surge in red. There's no question these are bots, right? All the data supports it. They're not even really disguised. These are bots, but these did not click through on your ads. Okay, these just hit your website directly. So because of that, it's a nuisance, right? It's causing more load on your servers, but they are not ad fraud. They are not click fraud. Again, an AI detection agent can't tell the difference because they don't understand the context. And there's many examples over the years where they say, oh, we got this super algorithm, these agents, AI things to help us, machine learning, all that kind of stuff. Say, for example, you train them on this kind of data. They're basically going to be very good at finding the same things. They're not going to be able to find the new forms of fraud that come along. Okay, so short answer is no. Okay, and if you choose to believe that they work, go right ahead and waste your money on the legacy vendors. But if you choose to get this kind of data so you can see for yourself, happy to help you, because not all bots are fraud bots, right? There are some legitimate bots and use cases. Okay, so the last section, I think we got time to finish this one, is what advertisers can do. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but these are kind of actions to show you what advertisers are already doing. I'm going to ask the audience to kind of think of an answer in their own mind as I go through this. So if you look at these 3 different paid display sources, the question is, which would you allocate more budget to, and which would you allocate less budget to optimize your campaigns? Just looking at A, B, and C. Yeah, 10 seconds, think of an answer, and then I'll reveal. So obviously, you would reduce budget to A because it has more bots and fraud and less humans, and you would increase budget allocation to C because it has more blue and much less red. Okay, so this is how you reallocate your budget to improve your campaigns. This next slide shows you what good publishers look like. That means they have human audiences, so lots and lots of blue. But also note that good publishers don't have zero bot traffic because they are public web pages, right? Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNN, they're all public web pages. And recently, there's been a whole bunch of AI crawlers there to steal their content. So even good publishers doesn't mean they have zero bot traffic. It just means they have a lot of humans because humans know about them. On the flip side, you've seen these charts before, when it's a fraudulent seller who is deliberately trying to rip you off, it could be up to 90%, if not 100%, because they don't have any human visitors, and so they have to buy all their traffic. So here's a few quick examples where once we have the proper detection in place, you can see where the fraud is coming from and say, oh, these are the bad sites, bad apps. Let's add them to a block list. And in all of these cases, you can see that the fraud is cut in half or more. Okay, so not only can you optimize away from the fraud, you can also optimize towards the human. So in this case, this was my client, Georgia Pacific, and again, they've published this so I can mention them. Their red was already pretty good. It's sub 20%. Okay, but notice they started off at 10% humans, but they 8x'd that by simply optimizing their targeting. In this case, they targeted more iPhones because humans use iPhones and bots don't like to pretend to be iPhones. Okay, so they could significantly increase the blue, not just press down the red. And they could also do that for video ads where we don't even have complete information, right? So a lot of the white is basically how we disclose to the client what is not measurable and where we don't have data. Okay, we can also do this for CTV. This is just to give you a visual contrast. A great CTV campaign has a lot of blue in it, and a CTV campaign that needs improvement has a lot more red in it. Okay. I'm going to skip this one, but long story short, you all know about SPO, supply path optimization. When you have too many supply sources, you're just letting the bad guys eat your money. Okay, so you try to reduce the supply paths as much as possible to reduce the leakage. And then one final thing to look at would be render rate. On the left-hand side, all of these ads fail to render because they just didn't get to the device in time. On the right-hand side, this is my client, Georgia Pacific. All of these ads rendered, and these are display ads. So these are small file sizes. So you can imagine the render rate for video ads is practically zero. Okay, so for all of you who are buying OLV, talk to me afterwards. Talk to Mark and Jonathan afterwards. We can give you some advice on that. Okay, so here are some linked case studies where Beiersdorf, Georgia Pacific, Goodway Group wrote about their use of Fou Analytics. So I'll leave you with this thought, and then we'll open up for questions. A lot of advertisers are already optimizing for ads, meaning you press down the red and then you optimize towards the blue. There's something called attentiveness, which we can get into another time, but again, it's one step beyond viewability and attention. And then finally, all of you realize that we need to be optimizing for outcomes, not just the vanity metrics like the number of clicks or the click-through rate.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll leave it at that. We will be sharing the deck afterwards, but let's open for questions.
Right. Sekovasa's got two. Are the big players in the digital media space, Google, Meta, etc., doing enough to protect their advertiser investments against fraud?
Not even slightly. But let me articulate why Google search ads still work. Display ads on Facebook and Instagram still work. You have to think of these platforms in two parts. One is the main property, and the second is the audience network, meaning everything else that's not the main property that are still running their ads. So we all know humans Google things. So if your ad stays on the main property, it will be seen by those humans who Google things. But if it's on the search partner network, which are the millions of sites and apps outside of the main property, you're going to get ripped off to the tune of literally 100%. So the easy solve for that, you don't need any tech, you don't even need Fou Analytics for this, is just to turn off search partner network. Turn off every single form of audience network because that's where most of the fraud lives. Okay, I have an article on that and you can just find it on my LinkedIn, but I think most of the savvy advertisers have already turned off audience networks to avoid 90% of the obvious fraud.
Wow. Okay. How effective are mainstream ad fraud prevention tools such as Lunio as at combating fraud? How do you usually justify investing or allocating part of your media spend to such tools that are very expensive?
Whether they work, answer is not at all. And let me explain why. I'm not going to name names because other people do the same thing as Lunio, right? But the click fraud detection and blocking platforms are actually doing you a disservice, because if they block the clicks from coming to your site, you can't see that you have a problem. So for example, if you're running a search campaign and you have a lot of clicks, yes, some of these are obvious bots. You actually want to see those bot clicks come to your website so you know, okay, I have a bot problem in this particular campaign, so you can go do something about it. If they detect it as a bot and simply block it from coming to your website, you're losing visibility into the problem. So similarly, Google Analytics is required by the IAB to filter out all the bots and spiders in the IAB list of bots and spiders. So they simply filter out and don't show you. That becomes a problem because you can't see those bots. You need to see them to know if you have a problem. So again, that was an example of what was a good idea. Oh yeah, let's filter out the bots. That in practice actually caused more confusion because now you can't see that you have a problem. So what we recommend doing is adding Fou Analytics next to GA, not in place of, right? Just add it next to your Google Analytics. We record everything and we can even tell you if it's orange or yellow or whatever kind of bots. And you can see where they came from. And if your social media campaign has a lot of bot clicks, you can go do something about it. If your Google search campaign has a lot of bots, you can go do something about it. That's why it's important to see that. And then one final note is that those companies that do the click fraud detection are primarily using IP addresses. And that is really not a good idea. 15 years ago is probably okay, because back then, most humans don't access the internet through data centers. So they look like residential or wireless IP addresses, and then bots were from data centers. So they would look like AWS or Google Cloud. These days, it's much more complicated because most of the bots are disguising themselves with residential proxy services. So they look like residential. Okay, so you don't want to block those. And then some humans are using VPNs. So they look like data centers. Again, you don't want to block those. So any service that is primarily using IP address for bot detection doesn't work. I'll put it plain and simple.
So
don't waste your money on it.
We don't have a lot more time. Before we go, what I am just going to say is we are going to share the deck. We'll share the recording. And then Dr. Fou and truthsets have been kind enough to offer a free consultation if you would like to book a time with them to have a conversation. And they are also prepared to offer free trials if you would like to do that. So I'll share all that information. You can contact them. We'll share the contact details. And then there are a lot of questions. So I think what I should do possibly, Dr. Fou, is would you be prepared to answer some of these in email if I send you these questions and then we can share it with the people?
No problem. Yeah, I can either reply in the email or even write an article to address all these questions. And it'll all be anonymous. So feel free to send Jillian even more questions, and then we'll try to group them and then address them. And I may already have some articles written.
There's some technical questions, but they're also going back to Byron's question about how do you make this land when people don't want to hear it? I mean, you spent most of half your life doing that. What would be your final sort of piece of advice?
Yeah, the very simple thing is to talk about it as analytics and not fraud. So over the 15 years that I've been doing this, the word fraud is very scary for most people. So what I've done recently is talk about analytics. And also a lot of the marketers are afraid of getting blamed because they didn't know that there was all this fraud. They're saying, oh, if we discover this and my boss finds out, my CFO finds out, I'm going to be in big trouble. No, you're not in big trouble. The reason you couldn't see it is because you were using legacy fraud verification companies who didn't show you because they couldn't detect it. So now if you have better analytics, just upgrade your tools. When you have better analytics, when you can see better, you can do better. So now that you have better analytics, you can see where the fraud is coming from, and we can put steps in place to make it better. You couldn't do that before because they told you everything was 1%. Don't worry about it, right? So talk about it as analytics, not as fraud. And those advertisers who want to be proactive, they can measure it, right? Mark, Jonathan, and I will help. And basically, once you measure it, even if it's 90%, don't be scared. because now we can see what kind of fraud is impacting your campaign. We can go do something about it and put a transition plan in place.
Yeah, and I think that's what I mentioned up front, is it's about reducing wastage, and I've seen the tool do that, where you can then go in and move it towards humans as opposed to the red. So thank you so much, Dr. Fou. Thank you, Mark and Jonathan. Thank you all for joining us. Please, if you want to send me more questions on email, please do that, and we'll put together a question list, and then we'll share the answers when we share the video and the recording. So have a brilliant day further, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julian.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Julian.
Bye.
Bye.